Number 10. A Viking cave treasure. A bizarre discovery in an Irish cave has local archaeologists beyond baffled. Dr. Marion Dowd led an excavation at the Glencurran Cave in the Burren National Park, and it turned out to be very worthwhile. The archaeologists uncovered a magnificent hoard of Viking treasure, and they can't really explain why or how it got there. As of right now, a precious Viking necklace found inside the cave is the largest of its kind to have ever been found in all of Ireland. The necklace consists of 71 glass beads wrapped in gold foil. It also dates back about 1,150 years. What scientists can't understand is how the necklace and the other treasures came to be hiding inside of such a remote Irish cave. Most archaeological finds in Ireland from the Viking Age aren't nearly this impressive. The necklace alone suggests a high-ranking member of Viking society was buried here, perhaps even someone royal. But what exactly a royal person would have been doing traveling from Scandinavia to Ireland in the late 19th century is unknown. Even more mysterious is that the Vikings never really settled the area. The cave is so remote that it makes no sense for anyone important to be buried there, yet they are. Dr. Dowd said that the cave has been excavated in 2004, 2008, and 2009, and said that she hopes to continue excavations and unravel the mystery, saying it's a labor of love. It's where I spend my holidays. Number 9. Shark extinction. A shocking new study by scientists from Yale University and the College of the Atlantic has unveiled some new tantalizing information about sharks. It turns out that roughly 19 million years before today, there was a huge extinction event involving sharks. Back then, there were about 10 times more sharks swimming in the world's oceans than there are today. But scientists can't actually explain why so many sharks suddenly died. According to Elizabeth Sibbert from Yale's Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences, researchers actually only discovered the extinction event by accident. They were creating a record of fish and sharks going back 85 million years when they suddenly realized there was a large gap in the timeline. In this large gap, they discovered that 70% of the apex predators on Earth vanished without a trace. To put this dramatic extinction into perspective, more sharks died during this event than from the mass extinction 66 million years ago when the asteroid killed the dinosaurs. Adding to the mystery is the fact that there's no known ecosystem disruption or climate calamity that occurred. This interval isn't known for any major changes in Earth's history, said Elizabeth Sibbert, a Hutchinson postdoctoral associate in Yale's Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences and the Yale Institute for Biospheric Studies. She's also the lead author of the new study, which appears in the journal Science. Yet it completely transformed the nature of what it means to be a predator living in the open ocean. The shark simply vanished, and scientists can't figure out what happened. Number 8. Lopsided Earth. Scientists have made some bizarre discoveries regarding the center of our planet. Earth's core seems to be growing, but only in one direction. Seismologists with the University of California, Berkeley say that the west side of the core is beneath Brazil, while the east side of the core is beneath Indonesia. For some reason, the part beneath Indonesia is growing faster than the other one. What do we mean by the core is growing? It means more iron crystals and a higher volume of material are being added to the core. The core is constantly being shaped thanks to the spinning of the planet and due to gravity. Extra matter is normally made even because of the spinning. The core should be uniform. The problem, though, is it's not. Some of the scientists say it could be heat causing one side of the core to get bigger than the other. However, it's only a theory at this point. Nobody really knows how a malformed core inside of Earth could affect the planet as a whole, but so far it seems gravity is still working as it should. It just so happens that the Earth's core is a little off-center. What do you think this means for the future of our planet? Should we be worried? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe if you haven't already. Number 7. Aliens on Mars. Some very strange objects have been found on the surface of the planet Mars, and no one is really sure what exactly they are, but some people have some wild ideas. Depending on who you ask, Mars is basically ripe with alien artifacts. It all began when NASA's Curiosity rover touched down on the planet's dry surface. It immediately began to photograph anomalies. At least that's what people on the internet are saying. One image appears to show something that looks an awful lot like an old and rusty nail. Another image shows something that kind of looks like a fossilized shoe. Then there's the picture of what looks like some kind of discarded septic tank. This is perhaps the strangest image because nobody knows if it was for sure taken by the rover. But if it was, it really looks like an artificial object left behind by a mysterious civilization that once lived there. Perhaps the weirdest thing is what's being called the Mars rat. By zooming in on one of the photos sent back to Earth, you can clearly see what looks like a rat scurrying between some rocks. Scientists were quick to dismiss this discovery as nothing more than a rat-shaped rock, while others claimed the photo was edited. But depending on who you believe, NASA may have accidentally shown the world that there is indeed life on Mars, and it comes in the form of rats. What do you think? Is there alien life hiding on Mars? Number 6. The Holy Grail. The Holy Grail is one of the most coveted relics in history, but is it actually real? The truth is that scientists and historians both aren't really sure what to make of the Holy Grail. According to the legends, it's supposed to be the very cup that Jesus drank from at the Last Supper. It's also the same cup that Joseph of Arimathea used to collect Christ's blood during the crucifixion. The search to find this legendary cup has been going on for thousands and thousands of years. The Grail first appeared back in the earliest tales of King Arthur. It was spoken of by French poets, and it was even hunted by the famous Indiana Jones. The issue is that the existence of Jesus Christ himself is seriously controversial. For the Holy Grail to exist, Jesus Christ himself must also have existed. This is why mainstream scientists don't believe the Grail is real. But there are many others who claim that the Knights Templar stole the Holy Grail from Temple Mount during the Crusades and stashed it away somewhere. It just has yet to be discovered. Number 5. Gobi Stonehenge. There's a mysterious collection of stone structures in the middle of the Gobi Desert that some archaeologists have dubbed the Chinese Stonehenge. There are 200 stone structures here that were found back in 2003 for the first time ever, and nobody's really sure what they are or who in the world built them. The formations vary in shape and size, but all resemble the sun. By that, I mean they're all organized in circles, looking like either the sun or the moon. Right now, the best guess archaeologists have is that the stone circles were made by a primitive culture of nomads who worshipped the sun. The stone circles may also have been sites of interest in which human sacrifices were made to their sun deity. There haven't been any human bones found just yet, and nobody knows which nomadic culture this was. Scientists can't even figure out how old the old stone structures are. They know pretty much nothing about them, other than that they're definitely ancient and must have served some kind of sacred ceremonial purpose. Number 4. Ancient Plague. In one of the most shocking discoveries of the year, scientists have discovered the oldest strain of plague known to mankind. Yikes! It was discovered inside the ancient bones of a man from the Stone Age dating back 5,000 years, and here is how the story goes. 5,000 years before today, a hunter-gatherer was bitten by a wild rodent, and that wild rodent passed along a strain of bacteria called Yersinia pestis. This is the pathogen which caused the Black Death, also known as the bubonic plague, that wiped out millions in the 1300s. Once infected with the Black Death, the Stone Age man died in his early 20s. This is fascinating because it's the oldest example of a person being infected with the plague. Also, its genome very closely resembles the plague in Europe 4,000 years after. As most of us already know, the bubonic plague killed roughly half the people in Europe over the course of about 7 years. But here's what's so mysterious. The ancient plague is missing a few traits that it had later on. It was a slow disease and not really that transmissible. It was missing the parts that made it spread quickly from person to person. It doesn't make sense because it's been believed for quite some time that the plague was very easily passed from one person to the next, which is why so many people died. What scientists need to understand now is how the plague gradually evolved over 4,000 years to become the worst outbreak of disease in all of human history. Number 3. The Unknown Palace. A recent drought in Iraq unveiled something quite amazing. Archaeologists found a magnificent palace from the Bronze Age, likely belonging to the long-lost Mitanni Empire that existed in Syria and Anatolia between the years 1500 and 1300 BC. The Mitanni Empire is considered one of the least investigated and most unknown civilizations anywhere in all of the Middle East. Here's where the drought comes in. Archaeological excavations were only possible thanks to the sinking water levels. When the water levels went down, the remains of the ancient palace appeared. It had been completely buried underwater. A team of German archaeologists rushed to Iraq to excavate as much of the site as possible, but they didn't find out all that much before the water levels rose once more and the palace was again submerged, likely to never be properly explored again. Number 2. Mysterious Ancient Shrine. In Spain, a mysterious cave has been found filled with unbelievable carvings of curious animals and unknown symbols. Some of the carvings date back 15,000 years to the Stone Age. Experts have referred to the entire cave as being some kind of sacred prehistoric shrine. Some of the cave paintings are fairly simple, displaying things like bulls and horses, but the symbols are a little harder to figure out. The archaeological team involved with the investigation has no clue what they could mean. Even more mysterious is that the cave wasn't in use for very long. All the artwork seems to have been created at around the same time. The cave itself is actually quite large, first discovered in 1853. Parts of it are huge, stretching deep underground. It's likely that a tribe of unknown prehistoric men and women lived in the dark confines of the cave before eventually venturing out into the world and forming societies. While dwelling in the cave, they left behind their artwork, including symbols that were probably very important to whatever mysterious religion these ancient people practiced. Number 1. Baby Dinosaur. In Florida, a woman claims to have witnessed a baby dinosaur dashing through her yard. This is obviously one of the most outlandish claims a person could make, and the fact that it happened in Florida says a lot. However, if the security footage from cameras mounted outside her house are to be believed, she might just be telling the truth. There could actually be some kind of tiny raptor on the loose, running through the Florida suburbs in the middle of the night under the cover of darkness. The footage of the supposed dinosaur was taken at 3:40 in the morning. According to animal experts, there are no indigenous animals in Florida that even come close to looking like the beast caught on camera. And even if there were, they wouldn't be out in the middle of the night or early in the morning. The only logical conclusion is that someone brought a dinosaur back to life and now it's running free. After Fox News reported the story and the disturbing surveillance footage was posted online, a lot of people came forward with their own theories. Some people said it looks like some kind of lizard, others said it was simply a dog, but the vast majority believe it was either an alien or a baby dinosaur. What do you think? Does Florida have baby dinosaurs? Number 10. Prinz Eugen. Originally a Nazi naval warship called a heavy cruiser, the Prinz Eugen entered service in August 1940 at the start of World War II. The U.S. ultimately captured the vessel as a war prize, and in 1946 the Prinz Eugen capsized after being nuked twice in atomic bomb tests at Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands, an archipelago in the South Pacific. The vessel, along with dozens of other ships, was bombed as part of Operation Crossroads, which was a series of tests to see what nuclear weapons would do to warships. Following the experiment, the Prinz Eugen was dangerously radioactive. After several failed decontamination attempts, the U.S. military towed the ship to Kwajalein Atoll, and 6 months later, it sank. It's still visible today, sitting upside down in the shallow water with the propellers sitting right above the surface. Starting in 1974, experts warned that the ship would leak oil into the ocean if it was not removed within the next 30 years. In 2018, the U.S. Army, U.S. Navy, and Republic of Micronesia worked together to remove up to 173 tanks of oil from the Prinz Eugen. 80 of the tanks were found to contain oil, which the crew carefully pumped out. Removing the oil was imperative to protecting the health of the environment and the local population, who have already suffered more than enough from the ill effects of radiation resulting from nuclear tests. The Prinz Eugen wreck remains in place as a popular diving site, and all of its oil tanks are sealed off to prevent leftover clingage from polluting the water. Number 9. Flying Tiger Flight 739. During the Vietnam War's early stages, the U.S. military chartered a Lockheed L-1049 Super Constellation propliner known as a Flying Tiger Flight Line 739. In March 1962, it was scheduled to carry 93 U.S. Army Ranger specialists and 3 Vietnamese soldiers from Travis Air Force Base in California to Saigon, Vietnam. After stopping to refuel in Guam, the aircraft headed toward Clark Air Base in the Philippines and vanished along the way without sending out any distress calls, prompting one of the biggest sea and air searches in the history of the Pacific. The search was called off after 8 days went by with no trace of the wreckage being discovered, despite a civilian reporting having witnessed what appeared to be an in-flight explosion the night the aircraft disappeared. To this day, nobody can say with certainty what happened to Flying Tiger Flight Line 739. The plane had 9.5 hours worth of fuel left and just 6 hours to go on its journey, so it didn't run out of fuel. The Civil Aeronautics Board concluded that the aircraft likely exploded in flight due to an unknown cause, and that's sadly about as much closure as they can bring to the families of those who perished in the ordeal. Number 8. USS Scorpion. Although the Cold War never erupted into direct combat between the US and the Soviet Union, both countries' militaries worked diligently to monitor the other in hopes of staying one step ahead amid ongoing tensions and fears of nuclear attack. One way the two adversaries did this was by conducting submarine surveillance and developing nuclear submarine warfare capabilities. The USS Scorpion was a 250-foot-long, nuclear-powered submarine that served in the US Navy. In February 1968, the vessel set off from Norfolk, Virginia with a 99-man crew for a 3-month deployment conducting Soviet naval reconnaissance in the Mediterranean. In mid-May, the Scorpion departed Naval Station Rota in Spain and headed back toward Norfolk. But it failed to arrive as scheduled, and the vessel's disappearance quickly escalated into a major military crisis. The Navy found the wreck off the Azores in October 1968. No official cause for the sinking was ever determined, but 1968 was an eventful year when it came to the disappearance of submarines. In addition to the Scorpion, 3 other subs vanished under mysterious circumstances, including the Israeli INS Dakar, the French Minerve, and the Soviet submarine K-129. Some believe that the Scorpion's disappearance resulted from a violent US-Soviet encounter, but other theories suggest that an accidental explosion or structural damage could have been responsible for the wreck. Number 7. 50 military vehicles. During the Gulf War in 1991, 50 U.S. military vehicles disappeared from an American Army base in Saudi Arabia. The compound was supposedly secured, yet Humvees, 5-ton trucks, and other vehicles vanished almost nightly, according to senior officers who spoke with the LA Times. Their disappearance concerned U.S. officials about the prospect of terrorists posing as American soldiers and launching an attack. None of the vehicles were found, despite an extensive U.S. military police investigation. During the second week of the war, American commanders received intelligence reports warning of over a dozen Palestinian terrorists operating in the area, and to be vigilant about suspicious-looking foreign nationals driving civilian vehicles. Some officers speculated that U.S. soldiers were stealing the vehicles to compensate for a shortage of vehicles and spare parts at other base camps that were awaiting supplies. At the time, troops were also experiencing drastic shortages of other equipment, including chemical suits and maps. Despite suspecting terrorists of stealing many of these things, officers claimed that security was adequate to protect the military against raids. It appears as though this perplexing mystery was never solved, or if it was, the conclusion was never publicly announced. Number 6. USS Bonhomme Richard. The USS Bonhomme Richard was a Continental Navy warship that served in the American Revolution. Originally a merchant ship for the East India Trading Company, the vessel fell under the direction of Naval Commander John Paul Jones in February 1779 as a French donation to the Patriot cause. In just weeks, the Bonhomme Richard captured 16 British vessels. But its glory days were short-lived, and in September 1779, the ship caught several bullets and was lit ablaze during the Battle of Flamborough Head in the North Sea off England's northeastern coast. Jones and his crew tried for 36 hours to keep the vessel afloat, but ultimately gave up and abandoned the ship. Shipwreck enthusiasts are still trying to find the U.S. Bonhomme Richard, and a few potential matches have been spotted, but their identity has yet to be confirmed. Finding the ship is proving to be difficult due to the sheer number of wrecks in the area, as well as over a century's worth of fishing trawler nets being dragged across the sea bottom. Moreover, authorities have not moved on identifying some wrecks due to disagreements between France and the U.S. over ownership of the Bonhomme Richard. But even if the two countries can move past all the bureaucratic red tape surrounding the vessel, there's no guarantee that anyone will ever find it. Number 5. Flight 19. In December 1945, a group of 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, collectively known as Flight 19, took off from a naval air station in Fort Lauderdale, Florida for a routine training exercise. The pilots were instructed to follow a triangular flight plan that involved passing over a place called Hens and Chickens Shoals, then heading north over Grand Bahama Island and back to base. Led by experienced pilot and war veteran Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, the flight initially went as planned. Things went awry after the crew turned north for the second leg of their trip, when Taylor became convinced that his navigation equipment was malfunctioning and that the patrol was flying in the wrong direction. Then they encountered heavy gusts and rain, further disorienting the pilots. Taylor claimed over the radio that he believed they were over the Florida Keys, which would have put them hundreds of miles off course. In hindsight, some experts believe that he got the Bahamas confused with the Keys and mistakenly believed that he and his fellow soldiers were in the Gulf of Mexico. He made the fateful decision to fly northeast, taking them further out to sea. At one point, Taylor's men convinced him to turn west, but he once again changed the flight's direction back east. Radio transmissions grew faint as the planes ran low on fuel, and Taylor instructed his men to prepare to ditch. Not only did the aircrafts and their crews vanish, but so did the Navy search team that immediately scrambled to find them by boat when they stopped communicating. An exhaustive subsequent search failed to yield any of the missing men or vehicles. But it's entirely possible, likely even, that the 5 planes from Flight 19 are still at the bottom of the Bermuda Triangle, resting in watery graves. Number 4. USS Cyclops. Built for the U.S. Navy several years before World War I, the USS Cyclops was originally designed as a bulk coal carrier called a collier. At nearly 550 feet, it was the Navy's largest and fastest fuel ship at the time. Outfitted with 50 caliber guns, the ship carried medical staff and supplies to a French hospital during World War I. During a 9-day journey from the West Indies to Baltimore in March 1918, the manganese-laden ship and its 309 crew members vanished seemingly into thin air without even sending out an SOS. A massive search effort ensued, but the vessel remains missing to this day. No evidence of what happened to it was ever found, including no debris or oil slick. The loss of its crew is the greatest non-combat loss of lives in U.S. Navy history. Its disappearance comes with long-held rumors regarding the Bermuda Triangle, German spies, aliens, and sea monsters as possible culprits. Some people blamed the ship's captain, George W. Worley, who was allegedly a drunk who was in no suitable position to command a ship. It's also possible that the crew encountered mechanical failures or was unfamiliar with how to handle the ship while it was loaded with heavy manganese ore, a material used in steel production and that the vessel did not usually transport. To this day, the disappearance of the USS Cyclops is considered one of the most baffling military mysteries of all time. Number 3. The tanks of Flamenco Beach. A collection of rusting World War II-era tanks stand in stark contrast to the white sand beaches and stunning scenery of Puerto Rico's Culebra Island, where the U.S. Navy performed military tests and bomb practice starting in 1936. This went on for decades, especially as pilots trained for war in Vietnam, with 228 missiles hitting the island in 1969 alone. Locals opposed the military's use of the island and became increasingly outspoken about their disapproval the following year when they staged nonviolent protests to end the naval occupation. After 7 months of blockades, sit-ins, and marches, the Navy finally agreed to leave Culebra Island and was completely gone by 1975. But it appears as though the Navy focused more on clearing out its personnel than its equipment, as evidenced by the handful of massive graffiti-covered tanks left behind, which are still stationed along the shoreline today. Number 2. Lady Be Good. During its first combat mission as part of the 376th Bomb Group on April 4, 1943, a U.S. Army Air Corps B-24D Liberator named Lady Be Good and its 9-man crew disappeared in the Mediterranean Sea while en route to its base in Libya after participating in a bombing raid on Naples. It was the only one of the mission's aircraft that did not return. A thorough search turned up no signs of the plane or clues about its fate, leaving officials to conclude that Lady Be Good likely went down in the sea. Then, in 1958, the plane was spotted in the Libyan desert by an oil survey exploration crew. Thanks to the arid conditions, it was well preserved, and it was evident that the aircraft had crashed. 8 of the 9 crew members' remains were found strewn throughout the desert in 1960. Along with their bodies was the diary of co-pilot Robert Toner, which revealed that the 8 men had survived the crash after overflying their base. They then walked 85 miles, desperate attempt to reach safety before 5 gave up. The remaining 3 survivors carried on for as long as they could, but they eventually perished. The fate of the missing 9th crew member remains a mystery to this day. Number 1. CH-46 Sea Knight. While the U.S. military evacuated Saigon in April 1975, a CH-46 Sea Knight helicopter piloted by 2 American pilots crashed into the South China Sea. The pair were the last U.S. pilots to die in Vietnam, and neither their bodies nor their helicopter were ever recovered. In 2016, a group of retired Marines longing for closure campaigned for the American government to search for the crashed aircraft. Named the Yankee Tango 14 Recovery Project after the chopper's ID number, the group claims to know the coordinates of the fatal disaster, which happened in waters between 65 and 100 feet, 20 to 30.5 meters deep, roughly 17 miles from the coastal city of Vung Tau. Surprisingly, not everyone with a personal connection to the tragedy supported the cause. Speaking with the San Diego Tribune in 2016, Steve Nustel, whose brother Captain William Nustel went down in the crash, said that the money it would cost to recover the wreck would be better spent caring for disabled veterans, but that his family would not object if the military decided it was appropriate to salvage the ruins and the human remains. "Let them rest in peace," he said. The government also seemed hesitant to pursue the recovery, with one official stating that underwater investigations are difficult at best due to the tendency for storms and currents to move them around on the ocean floor. It's easy to think that anyone who's lost a loved one to war would want that person brought home, but situations like this prove that it's not always the case, and that perhaps it's sometimes best to leave things and people in their original resting place. Number 10. The use of DDT. DDT, dichlorodiphenyltrichloroethane, is a colorless and tasteless chemical compound that was first developed as an insecticide in 1939 by Swiss chemist Paul Müller. The U.S. military used it during the second half of World War II to prevent the spread of insect-borne diseases like malaria, dengue fever, and typhus. Soldiers were given a supply of DDT powder and told to sprinkle it in their sleeping bags, and entire towns in Italy and the South Pacific were dusted with the chemical to keep their flea and mosquito populations under control. And it was very effective. As a result, the Second World War was the first war where fewer soldiers died from disease than in battle. DDT was widely seen as a miracle substance, and in the years following the war, it became readily available in the U.S. and elsewhere. But as it turned out, the chemical has severe environmental and health impacts. DDT is an endocrine disruptor, meaning it interferes with hormones, and it's also a carcinogen that has been linked with pancreatic cancer and liver cancer. Long-term exposure can also have severe effects on the reproductive system and on embryos and fetuses. Simply put, the chemical is at least moderately toxic. Therefore, DDT has been banned in the U.S. since 1972, and a worldwide ban was put into effect in 2004. Number 9. Mobile bathing and laundry stations. The first permanent laundromats and dry cleaning services at U.S. military bases around the country came after World War I. When World War II broke out, these services and facilities were extended to American military bases overseas. There were also mobile laundry stations and showers. Soldiers were taught how to use the on-the-go washing machines over a 12-week period at Camp Lee in Virginia. Laundry units consisting of 3 officers and 85 enlisted soldiers were then dispatched wherever they were needed, including to remote forested sites with no laundromats nearby. As many as 6 washing machines were packed into vehicles resembling semi-trucks, churning out 125 pounds, 57 kilograms of clean laundry per hour. Each load of laundry cost 50 cents, and while officers and enlisted men received priority service, civilians also utilized the service. Showers were available to soldiers free of charge and consisted of anywhere from 8 to 24 shower heads. These mobile units also offered fumigation services to get rid of insects. They probably used DDT. Both the laundry and shower facilities were meant to keep troops clean and lice-free, but to also boost their morale. I'm sure most people can agree that feeling clean does wonders for one's mental and emotional state, even amid trying circumstances. Number 8. Hygiene movies. Before heading off to the battlefield, servicemen were required to complete hygiene training, which involved watching a film instructing them on how to properly wash their bodies and shave. As silly as this may seem, the educational movie was not because the men didn't know how to bathe. The officers simply wanted to reinforce the policy for the sake of promoting personal and collective hygiene among the ranks. Upon learning their destinations, soldiers received site-specific hygiene training. Europe-bound troops learned about trench foot and typhus, for example, while those headed to the Pacific Theater were educated on malaria, parasites, and water safety. The most influential film material made by the military was a 7-film series called Why We Fight, made by Frank Capra. Created after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, it was designed to teach men the nature of America's involvement in the war. Some of Hollywood's biggest movie stars at the time, including Jimmy Stewart and John Wayne, participated in the making of the military's videos, which taught recruits everything from patriotism to the basics of staying clean and healthy. We'd laugh today, and I bet they laughed back then, but these films were still a key part of military culture back during the war. Number 7. The Millbank Disinfector. To combat lice and lice eggs during World War II, the U.S. Armed Forces ran their bedding, clothing, and rugs through a British-developed portable device called the Millbank Hot Air Disinfector and Drying Machine. It rid as many as 100 suits or blankets of bugs and their eggs in an hour or less by circulating hot air measuring 338 degrees Fahrenheit, 170 degrees Celsius through its mixing chamber. As effective as the Millbank Disinfector was, it struggled to keep up with the lice infestations of World War II. It was entirely possible for the freshly cleaned items to immediately become infested again. Lice was a major problem in World War II, especially because these bugs spread typhus and other diseases. Many prisoners in occupied Ukraine became louse feeders at the Lviv Institute for Typhus and Virus Research, acting as human sources of blood for typhus-infected lice for the purpose of researching potential vaccines against the illness. Louse feeders were at a significant risk for infection, but they received extra food rations and avoided being sent to labor and concentration camps in exchange for their services. They only spent an hour per day feeding the lice via a device attached to their leg, and this freed up time for the many louse feeders who were intellectuals before the war to engage in their research. And as dangerous as louse feeding sounds, it was arguably life-saving for some people because it kept them away from the war violence. Although the typhus vaccines developed at the Institute were meant to fall into German hands, some employees worked to smuggle the shots to the Polish resistance and even to concentration camps. Number 6. STI prevention. STIs like syphilis and gonorrhea were common among single U.S. soldiers who sought companionship and often had multiple different partners while fighting in World War II, particularly those serving in the Army and Navy. This prompted officials to launch a campaign to test the troops, to encourage wise, intimate decisions, and to carefully track disease outbreaks. Soldiers were urged to either remain abstinent or to commit to long-term monogamous relationships with STD-free partners, and they were also encouraged to always wear condoms. The U.S. government printed a series of brochures about maintaining good sexual health. They contained information to help troops easily diagnose and treat diseases, and medics were equipped with the proper medications for doing so. These pamphlets also offered wisdom, reminding soldiers that manhood is defined by having healthy reproductive organs and that intercourse is not necessary to keep strong and well. The literature also offered ominous warnings, including the possibility of an STD ruining a man's body and that most prostitutes have venereal disease. Troops were urged to avoid gambling their health away to so-called easy women, and that if an individual absolutely lacks self-control, to at least practice safe sex. Number 5. The shoe pack system. During World War I, around 2,000 U.S. soldiers and 75,000 British soldiers died from a serious condition called trench foot. also known as immersion foot syndrome, which is caused by the feet remaining wet for too long and a lack of dry socks and shoes. Trench foot deprives the feet of nutrients and oxygen, causing them to lose circulation and nerve function. Ultimately, it leads to worse conditions like gangrene, ulcers, permanent nerve damage, and even death. To prevent history from repeating itself during World War II, the British government encouraged women to make socks for soldiers, and factories shifted their production to sock making. In 1944, the U.S. implemented the shoe pack system, which provided troops with waterproof lined boots. Manufactured by L.L. Bean, the shoe pack was made of layers of rubber and leather and lined with felt to maintain warmth. The footwear was in short supply, and sometimes men had to wear the wrong size, but it was effective as long as they frequently changed their wool socks and kept their feet dry. If they didn't, they ended up with a condition called macerated feet or shoe pack foot, which caused the bottoms of the feet to get all wrinkled and waterlogged. It was not a pleasant sight. To ensure that troops used their shoe packs properly, the military established rules for wearing time and changing socks and insoles. There were also shoe repair teams, which made it much easier and quicker for soldiers to get their boots fixed than it was during World War I, when they had to rely on local contractors who used inferior materials and didn't work well. Number 4. Oral hygiene kit. During World War II, many soldiers suffered from a condition called trench mouth, which was caused by stress, malnutrition, and inadequate dental care, leading to bleeding, pain, and gum decay. In 1942, the War Department urged American soldiers to brush their teeth at least once daily to maintain their oral health. Troops were also issued hygiene kits containing tooth powder and toothpaste, the latter of which was previously only a luxury item afforded to society's more privileged classes. After the war, toothpaste became a common household fixture. The U.S. Army's promotion of dental hygiene among its ranks also helped spread good habits to American households. While society became aware of the benefits of brushing their teeth as early as 1915, many soldiers were rejected from serving in World War I because they did not have the minimum of 12 teeth that the military required. You heard that right. Some people were rejected for being too toothless. Think about that for a sec, and then take a moment to appreciate how far dental health has come. During World War II, the military strongly pushed soldiers to brush their teeth regularly, and the practice subsequently took firm hold among American families. In addition to tooth powder and toothpaste, World War II hygiene kits were equipped with a toothbrush, razor blades, shaving cream, and toilet soap, and soldiers received weekly rations of cigarettes, chewing gum, tobacco, candy, and matches. Do you know anyone missing all their teeth? What happened? Tell me about it in the comments down below. Then remember to subscribe to American Eye if you haven't already. Number 3. Halazone tablets. Having clean drinking water was imperative to soldiers' health on the battlefield, but the battlefield often lacked modern plumbing and other conveniences. Pressed to develop a sterilization method for water during World War II, the military looked for a non-toxic, quick-dissolving chemical that could withstand extreme humidity and temperatures and did not taste or smell terrible. Until then, soldiers relied on chloramine tablets, which took too long to dissolve and did not work in high temperatures for very long. While its effects on bacteria were slow, a substance called halazone came onto the scene in 1942 for lack of better alternatives. It was first given to troops in the Philippines after being approved by the Medical Department Technical Committee in 1944. Halazone was capable of purifying canteens containing water that was up to 2 years old and was extremely useful in places that lacked purified drinking water. Tablets were included in soldiers' C-ration packs until 1945, near the end of the war. Once opened, halazone had a shelf life of just 3 days, making it impractical in many ways, even if it was the best option available at the time. During the 50s, it was replaced by iodine-based tablets, which last for up to 3 months. Number 2. Water warnings. Water was a confusing topic for soldiers during World War II, who received seemingly mixed messages from their superiors and the government about the use of it. With the importance of staying clean drilled into troops' heads, many were quick to bathe using the local water supply wherever they were serving. Little did they realize, it often caused parasites, skin infections, and other serious ailments. For this reason, the military began issuing site-specific water warnings to soldiers. For example, men stationed on the island of Leyte in the Philippines were instructed not to swim in fresh water or to use it for washing their clothes for fear of catching schistosomiasis, also called bilharzia or snail fever, a condition caused by a parasitic flatworm that invades the urinary and digestive systems. Snail fever is second only to malaria as the most devastating parasitic disease, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. Symptoms usually start with itchy skin or a skin rash and are followed by a fever, cough, chills, and muscle aches, which set in over the next month or two. People sometimes experience no symptoms at all, but the parasite's presence eventually takes a toll, leading to liver, intestine, lung, and bladder damage. In rare cases, eggs reach the brain and/or spinal cord and cause seizures, inflammation, or paralysis. A snail fever outbreak during World War II caused the military to strengthen its water policies, ordering troops to only use water from approved places for drinking, bathing, laundry, and washing their vehicles or floors, and banning them from wading, swimming, bathing, or washing their clothes in local freshwater. For additional protection, soldiers serving in at-risk areas watched a film warning them of the dangers of snail fever and received rubber boots and other protective gear. Number 1. Food restrictions. Knowing that eating the wrong thing can have serious health implications, the U.S. military imposed strict guidelines on what foods its soldiers were allowed to consume. For example, American soldiers could buy food at public restaurants in the UK, but not on the European mainland. But this and other policies were hard to enforce, and many soldiers ignored the rules and got food from places they shouldn't. This behavior worsened as the war dragged on and their rations became more meager, featuring fewer meats, fruits, and variety in general. Military kitchen personnel were specially trained before heading overseas to cook for the troops, with the goal of improving cleanliness and food quality standards. Mess halls received regular visits from sanitation experts, who ensured that the facility and its workers adhered to safety and hygiene standards. When necessary, inspectors subjected food handlers to additional scrutiny. It's not something we always stop to think about, but it doesn't take much to acquire a foodborne illness, and this was especially true during World War II, which saw 190 outbreaks among over 22,000 people, according to a 1958 report by the U.S. Army Medical Service. 76 of the confirmed outbreaks were outbreaks of staphylococcal food poisoning. Within 3 to 4 hours of eating, an infected soldier suffered from nausea, vomiting, and/or diarrhea. While most returned to duty within a few days, food poisoning can easily be fatal, which is why the military took it so seriously. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next time for another exciting video right here on American Eye.